The morning air in Edinburgh does not just touch your skin, it tells you a story. A thick silver mist, what the locals call the Haar, rolls in from the North Sea, swallowing the spires and softening the jagged edges of the volcanic rock. Somewhere above, the great castle sits like a ghost in the clouds. You can hear the distant, lonely skirl of bagpipes, a sound that seems to vibrate through the very stones beneath your feet. This is a city of two faces, built on fire and shaped by shadows. Today we are not just visiting, we are wandering. But are you ready to lose yourself in the mist of time? Our journey begins at the bottom of a valley that should not exist. Emerging from the glass canopy of Waverley Station, you are immediately struck by the sheer verticality of Edinburgh. Most cities spread outward, but this one, it climbs. To your left, the lush greenery of Prince's Street Gardens marks where a loch once stood, and to your right, the blackened Gothic needle of the Scott Monument pierces the grey sky. It is a monument to a writer, which is fitting, because every inch of this city feels like a page from a dusty, leather-bound novel. The air here is crisp, carrying a faint scent of damp earth and roasting coffee. As we begin the ascent toward the old town, the transition is tactile. The smooth pavement of the station gives way to the first of many steep, winding streets. Coburn Street curves upward like a stone serpent, lined with independent shops and narrow doorways that seem to whisper of Victorian secrets. There is a specific rhythm to walking here, a steady rhythmic thrum of boots on pavement that has echoed for centuries. Looking up, the buildings seem to lean over the street, their windows like watchful eyes. The stone is dark, weathered by centuries of coal smoke and North Sea rain. This is the old reekie of legend, though the smoke has long since cleared, leaving behind a patina of history that you can almost feel if you run your hand along the rough masonry. It is cold to the touch, yet it feels strangely alive. As we reach the top of the curve, the sounds of the modern city begin to fade, replaced by something older and more resonant. We are approaching the spine of the city, the legendary Royal Mile. But before we step onto that historic thoroughfare, let us take a moment to look back at the valley we just left. The contrast is startling, the organised neoclassical beauty of the new town below and the chaotic medieval tangle of the old town above. It is as if the city is a physical manifestation of the human mind, half logic and order, half dreams and darkness. And yet one question remains. How did a place so rugged and unforgiving become the intellectual heart of the world? We step onto the Royal Mile, and the ground changes. The smooth asphalt is gone, replaced by the rhythmic jarring texture of granite setts, the famous cobblestones that define this street. This is the spine of Edinburgh, stretching exactly 1 Scots mile from the castle at the top to the palace at the bottom. It is a street that has seen processions of kings, the fury of mobs, and the quiet contemplation of philosophers. The crowd here moves with a different energy. It is a slow, meandering flow, as if the stones themselves demand a more reflective pace. To walk the mile is to walk through layers of time. You pass a medieval tavern, then a Victorian courthouse, then a modern cafe tucked into a 16th century cellar. The architecture is a vertical puzzle, buildings piled on top of buildings, reaching for the light in a city that was once the most densely populated in Europe. Listen closely to the sounds around you. The chatter of a dozen different languages blends with the distant rhythmic drumming of a street performer. There is a tactile richness here, the smell of wool from the tartan shops, the glint of silver in the jewelers' windows, and the constant shifting play of light on the dark stone. When the sun breaks through the clouds, the buildings seem to turn a warm, honeyed gold, but when the clouds return, they sink back into a somber, brooding grey. It is a place of heavy atmosphere. You can almost feel the weight of the millions who have walked here before you. Every close, every wind, and every court branching off this main road is a portal into another era. They are narrow, dark, and steep, inviting you to leave the main path and discover what lies in the shadows. But why were these tiny alleys built so close together? To understand that, we have to look at the walls that once hemmed this city in, forcing it to grow not out, but up toward the heavens. It was a choice born of necessity, and it created a skyline unlike any other in the world. As we look toward the upper end of the mile, our eyes are inevitably drawn to the massive silhouette of Edinburgh Castle. But look closer at what the castle is sitting on. This is not just a hill, it is the plug of an extinct volcano, a dormant giant that has stood here for 350 million years. The sheer black cliffs drop away into the gardens below, creating a natural fortress that has been occupied by humans since at least the Iron Age. There is something humbling about standing at the base of this rock. While the city around it has changed, burned, and been rebuilt, this volcanic basalt remains indifferent to the passage of time. Geologists call this formation a crag and tail. Thousands of years ago, a massive glacier moving from west to east hit this hard volcanic plug. The ice was forced around the rock, carving out the steep cliffs on the sides but leaving a long, sloping trail of debris behind it to the east. That trail of debris. That is the very ground the Royal Mile is built upon. This means that when you walk down the street, you are literally walking in the wake of an ancient glacier. The geography of the city was dictated by a cosmic collision of fire and ice. It is why the castle feels so dominant it was meant to be. For centuries, this was the safest place in Scotland, a high ground that could see an enemy coming from miles away. The texture of the rock itself is rough and unforgiving. If you touch the stones at the base of the castle walls, you are touching the literal foundation of Scottish identity. It is cold, hard, and eternal. It makes the human buildings on top of it look fragile, like a crown of lace resting on a mountain of iron. But this defensive strength came with a price. Because the city was built on a narrow ridge of volcanic debris, there was nowhere to expand. As the population grew, the only way was up. This geological quirk is what gave birth to the first skyscrapers of the world, tenements that rose 14 stories high, crowded with people from every walk of life. It created a city of intense proximity, where the richest lord and the poorest beggar lived just floors apart, and in that crowded darkness, secrets were bound to flourish. In the centre of the Royal Mile stands a building that seems to embody the very soul of the city, St. Giles Cathedral. Its distinctive crown spire, a delicate web of stone arches against the sky, has been a landmark for over 500 years. This is not just a church, it is the High Kirk of Edinburgh, the place where the fiery preacher John Knox once led the Scottish Reformation, changing the course of the history of the nation forever. As you walk past the heavy oak doors, the air feels cooler and the light changes. Inside, the stained glass casts long, colourful shadows across the stone floor, and the silence is so thick you can almost hear the prayers of centuries past. It is a place of grand scale and intimate detail, from the intricate wood carvings of the Thistle Chapel to the worn brass plaques honouring fallen soldiers and great thinkers. But just outside the cathedral, on the pavement of the High Street, lies something much more humble, yet equally significant. A small heart-shaped mosaic of coloured stones set into the cobbles, the heart of Midlothian. It marks the spot where the old Tolbooth once stood, a grim building that served as the administrative centre, courthouse and prison of the city. It was a place of execution and misery, a dark stain on the history of the city. Today you might see a local passerby pause for a moment and spit on the heart. To a stranger, it looks like an act of disrespect, but it is actually an ancient tradition. Originally an expression of contempt for the prison and the hangman, it has evolved into a gesture for good luck. It is a strange, visceral connection to the past, a way for the modern citizens of Edinburgh to keep a 500-year-old memory alive. The stone around the heart is worn smooth by millions of footsteps and centuries of weather. It is a reminder that in this city, the sacred and the profane have always lived side by side. The soaring heights of the cathedral spires and the dark history of the prison floor are just inches apart. It makes you wonder how much of our history is built on the things we choose to remember, and how much is buried beneath the very ground we walk on. As we move away from the cathedral, the mile begins to slope downward, leading us toward the darker, narrower parts of the story of the city. If the Royal Mile is the spine of Edinburgh, then the closes are its ribs. These narrow alleys, often no more than a few feet wide, branch off the main street every few yards, plunging down the steep sides of the ridge. To step into a close is to leave the noise of the 21st century behind and enter a world of shadows, stone, and silence. Some of these alleys are open to the sky, while others pass under low stone lintels that feel like the entrance to a cave. Their names are fragments of history: Advocates Close, Fleshmarket Close, Lady Stairs Close. They were named after the tradesmen who worked there or the notable residents who lived in the towering tenements above. As you descend, the temperature drops. The walls are so close you can touch both sides at once, and the stone feels damp and ancient. It is easy to imagine what life was like here in the 1600s, the shouting of neighbours from window to window, the smell of wood smoke and refuse, the flickering light of tallow candles. Because the city was so crowded, these alleys were the lifeblood of the community. They were the playgrounds, the markets, and the meeting spots. At the bottom of some closes, you will find a sudden, unexpected opening, a hidden courtyard or a small, secret garden. These pockets of peace are the city's best-kept secrets. One moment you are in a dark, claustrophobic passage, and the next you are standing under a flowering tree with the castle looming high above you. The contrast is jarring and beautiful. There is a specific acoustic to these places. Your footsteps echo against the stone with a sharp, metallic ring, and voices from the street above sound distant and ghostly. It is a place where the veil between the past and the present feels incredibly thin. You find yourself walking softly, as if not to wake the ghosts of the old Riki residents who once called these narrow cracks in the city home. But what happens when the city grows over its own past? Some of these closes were not just narrow, they were eventually built over entirely, becoming subterranean labyrinths buried deep beneath the modern streets. This brings us to a part of Edinburgh that many have heard of, but few truly understand, the city beneath the city, where the shadows are never chased away by the sun. Deep beneath the Royal Exchange Building lies a place frozen in time, Mary King's Close. In the 17th century, this was a bustling, vibrant street, open to the sky. But when the city decided to build a new Grand Exchange in the 1700s, they did not tear down the old houses. Instead, they chopped off the top floors and used the lower levels as foundations for the new structure. They literally buried a neighborhood alive. Walking through these underground rooms today is a haunting experience. There are no windows, only the oppressive weight of the stone overhead. The air is still and smells of dust and cold rock. You can see the original doorways, the hearths where fires once burned, and the narrow street where people once walked to work. It is a literal time capsule of medieval life, preserved in the darkness, of course. A place like this is ripe with legends. For years, people whispered that the close was walled up during a plague outbreak, leaving the sick to perish in the dark. While historians tell us this is not quite true, the residents were actually moved out before construction began. The atmosphere of the place makes the legends easy to believe. There is a room filled with dolls and toys left by visitors for Annie, a young girl whose ghost is said to haunt the shadows, searching for her lost family. Whether you believe in ghosts or not, the tragedy of Mary King's Close is real. It represents the thousands of anonymous lives that built this city, people who worked, laughed, and died in these very rooms, only to have their world covered by the progress of a newer, wealthier age. It is a reminder that history is not just about kings and battles, it is about the spaces we inhabit and what we leave behind when we go. The tactile experience here is intense. The walls are rough-hewn and uneven, and the floors are worn into hollows by centuries of use. It is a claustrophobic, grounding experience that makes you appreciate the light and air of the street above even more as we emerge back into the daylight of the Royal Mile. The city feels different. You realize that you are not just walking on ground, you are walking on the roof of a dead world, and yet, even in the dark, Edinburgh was preparing for a revolution of the mind that would change the entire world. But first, we must visit the place where the city's dead are honoured in a very different way. Leaving the Royal Mile behind, we walk a short distance to a place where the history of Edinburgh feels more personal. Greyfriars Kirkyard. This is not just a cemetery, it is a sacred ground that has seen both the height of religious devotion and the depth of human suffering. The grass is a vibrant, startling green against the blackened, crumbling monuments of the 17th century. As you walk through the iron gates, the city noise seems to drop away, replaced by the rustle of ancient trees and the cawing of crows. The gravestones here are works of art, covered in carved skulls, hourglasses, and shrouded figures, reminders to the living of the inevitability of death. But Greyfriars is also home to a story of incredible life and loyalty. Near the entrance you will find a small, well-worn statue of a Skye Terrier, Greyfriars Bobby. Legend says that for 14 years, this little dog kept watch over his master's grave, leaving only for food. It is a story that has touched hearts for generations, a symbol of the enduring bond between humans and animals. Even now, people leave sticks and toys at the base of his headstone. It is a soft, sentimental note in a city often defined by its hardness. However, Greyfriars has a darker side. In the corner of the graveyard lies the Covenanters' prison, where hundreds of religious dissidents were held in brutal conditions in 1679. Nearby is the Black Mausoleum, said to be the home of the Mackenzie poltergeist. It is considered one of the most haunted spots in the world, and even the most skeptical visitors often find themselves shivering as they walk past the locked iron gates. The stone here feels different, colder somehow, and more menacing. This tension between the sweet story of Bobby and the grim history of the Covenanters is what makes Greyfriars so captivating. It is a place of peace and a place of unrest. You can spend hours reading the names on the stones. Names that inspired writers like J.K. Rowling, who famously found names for her characters while walking these paths. Take a moment to sit on one of the wooden benches, feel the dampness in the air and the stillness of the trees. There is a profound sense of continuity here. The people buried beneath these stones were the ones who built the city we see today. Their beliefs, their fears and their loyalties are woven into the very fabric of the landscape. But as we look out from the kirkyard toward the north, we see a whole new side of Edinburgh waiting for us. A side built on reason, light, and the rejection of the shadows we have been exploring. Descending the colourful, curving slope of Victoria Street, we arrive in the wide, open expanse of the Grassmarket today. It is a vibrant hub of pubs, restaurants and market stalls, with one of the most spectacular views of the castle towering directly above. But for centuries, this was a place of a very different kind of gathering. In the shadow of the rock, the Grassmarket was the main marketplace of the city for cattle and horses. You can almost hear the phantom sounds of lowing cows and the haggling of farmers. However, it was also the primary site for public executions. The shadow of the gallows hung heavy over this square. Thousands would gather here to watch the final moments of criminals and martyrs alike. There is a monument at the east end of the square, marking the spot where the gallows once stood. It is a somber place, but the locals have a dark sense of humour about it. Look at the names of the pubs, The Last Drop or Maggie Dixon's. The story of Maggie is a local legend. She was a woman who was hanged in the Grassmarket in 1724, but who came back to life in her coffin on the way to the cemetery. Because she had technically been executed, the law could not hang her twice, and she lived for many more years, known forever as Half-Hang-It Maggie. The Grassmarket is a place where you can feel the energy of the crowd. Even now, on a Saturday afternoon, the square is full of life. There is a sensory overload here. The smell of hops from the old breweries, the sound of laughter spilling out of doorways, and the sight of the massive dark cliffs of the Castle Rock looming over the colourful shopfronts. It is a reminder that in Edinburgh, the past is never buried very deep. It is just transformed. As you walk across the square, notice the texture of the open space. It feels different from the narrow closes we just left here. The city could breathe, even if that breath was often filled with the tension of a public trial. But the city was about to change in a way that no one in the Grassmarket could have imagined. A new vision was being born, one that would leave the medieval chaos behind for something far more orderly. But where did the money and the will for such a transformation come from? To get from the old town to the new town, we have to cross a massive artificial hill known simply as the Mound. It is easy to walk across it without realizing what it actually is. This is not a natural feature of the volcanic landscape. It is a monument to human labour. In the 1700s, as the new town was being built, the workers needed somewhere to put the millions of tons of earth they were digging up. So they dumped it into the valley between the two towns, right into the stagnant, polluted waters of the Norloch. Over several decades, this pile of foundations grew into a permanent bridge of earth. Today, the Mound is home to the stunning neoclassical buildings of the National Gallery of Scotland and the Royal Scottish Academy. With their grand Doric columns and pale sandstone, they look like Greek temples transported to the chilly north. It is a physical manifestation of the Athens of the north, the idea that Edinburgh was becoming the intellectual and architectural successor to the great cities of antiquity. Standing on the Mound, you can look in both directions and see the two halves of the city's split personality. To the south, the dark, jagged skyline of the old town, a tangle of chimney pots and Gothic spires. To the north, the perfectly straight lines and elegant squares of the new town. It is the Enlightenment in stone form. The walk across the Mound is often windy, with the breeze whipping up from the valley below. You can hear the trains rattling through the station beneath you, a modern reminder of the city's constant movement. But there is a stillness to the galleries themselves. If you pause on the steps, you can feel the transition. You are leaving the medieval world of superstition and narrow alleys and entering a world of light, reason, and geometry. But was the new town just about architecture, or was it an escape? As we step off the Mound and onto Princes Street, we are entering a world built by a generation of thinkers who believed they could solve the mysteries of the universe. And for a brief, brilliant moment in history, they almost did. Stepping into the new town is like taking a deep, clean breath. The streets are wide, the corners are square, and the buildings are all of a uniform height and colour. This was the first planned urban expansion in Britain, designed by a 26-year-old architect named James Craig in 1767. It was an intentional rejection of the old town's chaos. If the old town was a forest, the new town was a garden. We walk down George Street, the central artery of this new world. The sandstone is a warm, creamy buff colour, quite different from the soot-stained basalt of the Mile. Everything here is about symmetry and balance. The doors are grand, often framed by elegant fan lights and brass knockers that gleam in the afternoon light. It is a world of quiet wealth and intellectual confidence. At the end of the street lies Charlotte Square, perhaps the most perfect example of Georgian architecture in the world. Designed by Robert Adam, the north side of the square looks like a single massive palace, but it is actually a row of individual townhouses. This is where the elite of the Scottish Enlightenment lived, the judges, the philosophers, and the scientists who were redefining how we understand the world. There is a sense of calm here that is almost palpable. The noise of the city seems muffled by the heavy stone and the wide green spaces. You can hear the occasional click of a bicycle or the distant chime of a clock. It's a tactile experience of order. The iron railings are perfectly spaced, the windows are perfectly aligned, and the very air feels more organized. But don't let the beauty fool you into thinking this was a boring place. Behind these elegant facades, the most radical ideas of the century were being debated. This was the home of David Hume, who questioned the very nature of human knowledge, and Adam Smith, who mapped the invisible forces of the economy. They lived in these light-filled rooms, looking out over the Firth of Forth, and they reimagined the human experience. As you walk along the pavement, notice the detail in the stonework. Every leaf and scroll on the capitals of the columns is a testament to the skill of the masons. It was a massive investment of time and money, a statement to the world that Scotland was no longer a rugged backwater, but a centre of global civilization. However, even in this world of reason, the old city still exerted its pull. The thinkers of the new town couldn't help but look back at the dark, romantic silhouette of the castle. They were men of two worlds, and that duality is what defined the Scottish soul. Standing tall in Princes Street Gardens is a structure that looks like a Gothic spaceship ready to launch into the grey Scottish sky. This is the Scott Monument, the largest monument to a writer in the world. It is a blackened, intricate spire of Binny sandstone, standing over 200 feet tall, and it is a testament to the incredible influence of one man, Sir Walter Scott. Scott was more than just a novelist. He was the man who invented the modern image of Scotland. Before him, the Highlands were seen as a wild, dangerous place. Scott's poems and novels, like Ivanhoe and Rob Roy, turned that image into one of romance, chivalry, and misty mountains. He gave Scotland its stories back, and in return, the city built him this towering stone cathedral of words. If you have the stamina, you can climb the 287 narrow spiral steps to the top. As you ascend, the walls close in, and the wind begins to whistle through the open stonework. It's a dizzying physical experience, but the reward is a view that takes your breath away. You can see the entire layout of the city, the old town and the new town laid out like a map at your feet. From up here, you can see the statues of characters from Scott's books tucked into the niches of the spire. There are 64 of them in total, a silent audience watching over the city. Below, in the centre of the monument, sits a white marble statue of Scott himself, with his faithful dog Maida at his side. He looks thoughtful, perhaps dreaming up another tale of border raids or royal intrigue. The stone of the monument is famously black. For years, people thought it was built of dark rock, but it's actually the same pale sandstone as the rest of the new town. It has simply soaked up 2 centuries of city soot and smoke, turning it into a dark, brooding sentinel. It fits the mood of Edinburgh perfectly, a city that wears its age and its grime like a badge of honour as we descend back to the gardens.
The shadow of the monument stretches across the grass. It's a reminder of the power of storytelling. Scott didn't just write books. He changed the way we see the landscape. He made the mist feel magical and the ruins feel meaningful. But what about the men who didn't want romance? What about the men who wanted only the cold, hard truth of the world? To find them, we have to look toward the monuments on the hill.
If you want to see the Athens of the North in its most literal form, you have to climb Calton Hill. Situated at the east end of Princes Street, this hill is an architectural playground, covered in an eclectic collection of monuments that seem to have been dropped there by a passing giant with a love for classical history. The most striking feature is the National Monument. It was designed to be a full-scale replica of the Parthenon in Athens, a memorial to the Scottish soldiers who died in the Napoleonic Wars, but money ran out after only 12 columns were built. For decades it was called Edinburgh's disgrace, a symbol of overambition. But over time, the city fell in love with its unfinished ruin. Today, it is one of the most photographed spots in the city. There is something strangely poetic about a half-finished temple standing on a Scottish hilltop. It reflects a city that is always a work in progress, a place where the imagination always outruns the budget. Nearby stands the Dugald Stewart Monument, a graceful circular temple that has become the unofficial symbol of Edinburgh. From its base you get the classic view of the city, the clock tower of the Balmoral Hotel, the Scott Monument, and the castle, all lined up in perfect harmony. It's a view that feels almost too beautiful to be real, like a painted backdrop for a play. The experience on Calton Hill is one of space and wind. The air here is fresh and carries the scent of the nearby sea. You can hear the distant hum of the city below, but up here you are above it all. It's a place for reflection. People come here to watch the sunset, to paint, or just to sit and think. It was a favorite spot of the Enlightenment philosophers who used the elevation to clear their minds. As you walk between the monuments, notice the different textures of the stone. The smooth white columns of the National Monument contrast with the dark circular tower of the Nelson Monument, which looks like a giant telescope pointing at the sky. Everything here is meant to inspire. It was a statement of cultural pride, a way for Edinburgh to say that it belonged among the great capitals of the world. But as you look out toward the east, the monuments give way to a much more rugged, natural landscape. The city starts to dissolve into the wild slopes of Holyrood Park and the massive sleeping lion of Arthur's Seat. We've explored the city built by men. Now it's time to explore the city built by nature. We have spoken of the mist, but to truly understand Edinburgh, you have to experience the Haar. This is not your typical fog. The Haar is a cold, thick sea mist that rolls in from the North Sea, creeping up the Firth of Forth and swallowing the city whole. It can happen on a warm summer afternoon, turning a bright day into a spectral grey dreamscape in a matter of minutes. When the Haar arrives, the city changes its character. The colours of the stone deepen, turning from grey to charcoal. The sounds of the streets become muffled, as if the air itself is made of cotton. The distance disappears, leaving only the immediate circle of light around you. It is a deeply sensory experience. You can taste the salt on your lips, and the dampness clings to your clothes like a heavy coat. For the people of Edinburgh, the Haar is a familiar companion. It brings a sense of mystery and introspection. The castle seems to float in mid-air, disconnected from the earth. The spires of the old town become jagged silhouettes, and the modern world seems to vanish entirely. It is in these moments that the literary ghosts of the city feel most present. You might find yourself walking a bit slower, listening for the sounds that the mist cannot hide. The lonely tolling of a bell, the cry of a seagull, or the distant rumble of the tide. The Haar reminds us that despite all the stone and the logic of the Enlightenment, Edinburgh is still a coastal city, forever at the mercy of the wild North Sea. It is a reminder of the impermanence of things. Even the most solid buildings can be erased by a cloud. But there is beauty in this erasure. The Haar simplifies the world. It strips away the distractions and leaves you with the essence of the place, the shape of the hills, the smell of the sea, and the weight of the silence. It is a moment of pause in a busy world, and as the mist begins to lift, it reveals the landscape in a new light, refreshed and renewed. It is the perfect mood as we move toward the royal heart of the city, where the history is as thick as the mist itself. We have reached the bottom of the Royal Mile here. The street opens up into a grand courtyard, facing the palace of Holyrood House. If the castle at the top of the hill is about defence and power, this palace is about elegance and the complicated history of the Scottish monarchy. It has been the official residence of the British monarch in Scotland for centuries, but its most famous inhabitant remains the tragic Mary Queen of Scots, walking toward the palace. You feel a shift in the atmosphere. The ruggedness of the old town gives way to manicured lawns and the classical symmetry of the palace walls. But the most evocative part of this site is not the palace itself. It is the ruins of Holyrood Abbey attached to the side of the royal residence. The abbey was founded in 1128, and today it stands as a magnificent skeleton of stone. The roof is gone, leaving the massive pointed arches open to the sky. The grass grows between the flagstones of the floor, and the wind whistles through the empty window frames. It is a place of profound melancholy and beauty. You can run your fingers over the weathered carvings of the columns and feel the weight of nearly 900 years of history. This is where Mary Queen of Scots lived through some of the most dramatic moments of her life, including the brutal murder of her secretary, David Rizzio, in her private chambers. The palace is full of these stories, of intrigue, betrayal, and the struggle for the soul of a nation. But even the palace feels small when compared to the backdrop. Looming directly behind the abbey is the sheer volcanic cliff of Salisbury Crags. The contrast is startling, the refined man-made beauty of the palace nestled at the foot of a wild ancient mountain. It is a reminder that even royalty is subject to the forces of nature. The palace feels like a gateway, on one side, the city and its history, on the other, the wild open spaces of Holyrood Park. As we stand at the end of the mile, looking up at the hills, the city story feels complete. We have seen the fire of the volcano, the darkness of the closers, the light of the Enlightenment, and the elegance of the crown. But there is one final ascent to make. To truly see Edinburgh, you have to leave it behind and climb into the sky.
The final part of our journey takes us away from the pavement and onto the grass. Arthur's Seat is the highest point in Edinburgh, another remnant of that ancient volcano we saw at the castle. But while the castle is a fortress, Arthur's Seat is a wilderness in the heart of the city. The climb begins on the sloping paths of Holyrood Park. As you ascend, the sounds of the city quickly fade. The traffic becomes a distant hum, and the air grows colder and more vibrant. The path is a mix of gravel, worn stone, and springy turf. It's a physical challenge, a reminder of the ruggedness of the Scottish landscape that lies just beyond the city limits, to your right. The Salisbury Crags rise up like a giant's wall. These are sheer cliffs of dolerite, glowing a deep, rusty red in the late afternoon light. The path along the top of the crags offers a dizzying view down into the city. You can see the people below looking like ants, and the rooftops of the old town huddled together for warmth. As you push toward the summit of Arthur's Seat itself, the terrain becomes more rocky and uneven. You have to watch your step, placing your boots on the dark, polished basalt. The wind here is constant, a powerful force that seems to want to push you back down toward the safety of the valley. But the effort is worth it. Reaching the top is a moment of pure exhilaration. You are standing on the very peak of the volcano, 800 feet above sea level. From here, the world opens up in a 360-degree panorama. To the north, the blue waters of the Firth of Forth stretch out toward the North Sea, dotted with islands and the distant silhouettes of the great bridges. To the south, the rolling green waves of the Pentland Hills, and right below you, the entire city of Edinburgh is laid out like a model. From this height, you can see the logic of the place. You see how the glacier carved the ridge, how the people built the mile, and how the new towns spread across the plain. You see the green parks, the dark stone, and the silver water. It's a moment of deep connection. You aren't just looking at a city, you are looking at a living organism that has grown and adapted over thousands of years. Find a flat rock to sit on, let the wind whip around you. The tactile roughness of the stone, the smell of the wild gorse, and the sheer scale of the view create a sense of profound peace. You are at the highest point of the journey, both physically and emotionally. But what does this view tell us about the endurance of history, and how does it change the way we see the streets we just walked? From the top of Arthur's Seat, our gaze is pulled toward the horizon, where the land meets the sea. There, spanning the Firth of Forth, is one of the most recognizable structures in the world, the Forth Bridge.
Even from this distance, its brilliant red colour stands out against the blue of the water and the grey of the sky. It is a masterpiece of Victorian engineering and a symbol of Scotland's industrial might, completed in 1890. The bridge was the first major structure in the United Kingdom to be built entirely of steel. It was a response to a tragedy, the collapse of the nearby Tay Bridge during a storm. The engineers, John Fowler and Benjamin Baker, were determined to build something that would never fall. They created a cantilever design so strong and so massive that it changed the way we thought about what was possible. There is a famous phrase in the United Kingdom, painting the fourth bridge. For over a century, it was a task that never ended. By the time the painters reached one end, it was time to start again at the other. It became a metaphor for a never-ending job. However, modern glass flake epoxy paint has finally brought that tradition to an end, ensuring the bridge stays its iconic fourth bridge red for decades to come. Looking at the bridge from the heights of the volcano, you realize it is the industrial equivalent of the castle. It is a fortress of iron, built to conquer the elements. It is a reminder that the Scottish Enlightenment did not just produce books and philosophy, it produced the engineers and innovators who built the modern world. The same spirit of inquiry that led David Hume to question the mind led these men to master the sea. The bridge is now a United Nations educational, scientific and cultural organization, World Heritage Site, recognized as a global icon of the industrial age. It stands as a bridge between the old world of stone and the new world of steel. It is a beautiful, jarring sight, a geometric crimson latticework in a landscape of soft hills and organic coastlines. It tells us that while Edinburgh is a city of the past, it has always been a city looking toward the future. But as the sun begins to dip lower, the iron and stone start to fade, and the city prepares for its most magical hour.
As we begin our descent from Arthur's Seat, the light starts to soften, turning the city below into a tapestry of shadows and gold. We have walked through the fire of the volcano, the darkness of the closes, the logic of the new town and the romantic spires of the monuments. But through it all, one thing has remained constant: the stone. Edinburgh is a city carved from the earth. Whether it is the ancient basalt of the castle or the elegant sandstone of the new town, the stone is the witness to everything that has happened here. It has absorbed the prayers, the protests, the secrets, and the dreams of millions. When you touch a wall in the old town, you are not just touching a building, you are touching a physical record of the human experience. There is a profound sense of endurance here. The city has survived plagues, fires, and wars, yet it remains stubbornly, beautifully itself. It is a place that respects its past without being trapped by it. We see this in the way the modern Parliament building sits at the foot of the ancient crags, or how a centuries-old close now leads to a vibrant modern gallery. It is a conversation between the eras, walking back toward the city lights. You might feel a sense of quiet. The reflective pace of this journey allows the layers of history to settle in your mind. You realize that you are now part of that history. Your footsteps have added to the wear on the cobbles. Your breath has joined the mist. The city teaches us about the beauty of contrast. You need the darkness of the winds to appreciate the light of the squares. You need the hardness of the rock to appreciate the softness of the gardens. It is a place of balance. And as the old Reiki transitions into the night, it feels more intimate than ever. The stone seems to hold onto the heat of the day, and the windows start to glow with a warm, inviting light. We are coming to the end of our walk, but the story of the city is far from over. It is simply waiting for the next person to come and discover its secrets in the mist. The sun has slipped below the horizon, and Edinburgh enters the blue hour. This is the time when the sky turns a deep electric indigo and the city lights begin to twinkle like stars fallen to earth. The street lamps of the Royal Mile glow with a soft amber light, casting long shadows across the cobblestones. This is perhaps the most magical time to be in the city. The harshness of the day is gone, replaced by a dreamlike quality. The silhouette of the castle is illuminated by powerful floodlights, making it look like it is floating in the dark sky. The spires of the churches and the Gothic needle of the Scott Monument become sharp, black cutouts against the blue. Listen to the city now. The sounds have changed. The bustling energy of the afternoon has given way to a more relaxed, convivial atmosphere.
You can hear the low murmur of voices from the pubs, the occasional clink of a glass, and the distant, rhythmic footsteps of people heading home. The air is cool and carries the faint, sweet scent of malt from the nearby distilleries. Every corner you turn offers a new cinematic view. A narrow close illuminated by a single lantern, a wide, empty street in the new town reflected in the damp pavement, the glowing windows of a high tenement, each one a tiny world of its own. It is a city of 1,000 pictures. As we reach the end of our journey, take one last look around. Notice the texture of the light on the stone. Notice how the mist has finally cleared, leaving the air sharp and clear. This is Edinburgh, a city of mist and stone, of history and heart. It is a place that stays with you long after you have left its streets. It is a place that invites you to return, to wander and to dream. But for now, it is time to say goodbye to the shadows and the spires, and carry the memory of this walk with us into the night.
Thank you for joining me on this reflective walk through the mist and stone of Edinburgh. I hope you have felt the weight of the history and the beauty of the silence as we travelled from the Royal Mile to the heights of Arthur's Seat. Edinburgh is a city that lives in the imagination as much as it does in reality, and everyone who visits finds a different story in its shadows. What part of this journey spoke to you the most? Was it the buried streets of the old town, or the wild peak of the volcano? Please share your thoughts and your own dream destinations in the comments below. If you enjoyed this journey, consider subscribing for more slow, immersive stories from around the world. Until next time, keep dreaming.